A retail giant is closing stores. Walmart plans to shut down 269 stores.
World's biggest retailer by volume and profit, that would be Walmart, warned today that it may have to start raising prices due to President Trump's tariff policy.
Trump told Walmart to, quote, eat the cost of rising tariffs so they can keep prices low for consumers.
What if a single signature in Washington could detonate the biggest retail giant on earth? What if one order from President Trump sent Walmart, America's unbeatable low-price machine, crashing into a $25 billion loss, shuttering distribution centers, and throwing tens of thousands of workers into chaos? How did groceries explode overnight? Beef leaping from $9 to $14, produced prices surging, and entire aisles going bone dry across the country. And why did Target, Costco, and Home Depot suddenly abandon China in a desperate scramble that overloaded global factories, jammed ports with rotting cargo, and sent shockwave from California to Nairobi? As shipping prices tripled and supply chains snapped like brittle wire, analysts warned the unthinkable. This wasn't just a retail crisis. It was the opening act of a potential economic collapse. So we have to ask, if the backbone of American retail breaks, what happens to the country built on it? In 2025, a political move in Washington ignited one of the most dramatic retail crises in modern American history, beginning when President Trump publicly told Walmart to eat the cost of rising tariffs in order to keep prices low, only for the retail giant to warn almost immediately that such a strategy was impossible as the White House's sweeping tariff wave tore through the U.S. economy with almost no warning. The first blow landed on April 2nd, when Trump signed Executive Order 14,257, the so-called Liberation Day tariffs, triggering a 10% baseline tariff on nearly all imports not originating from Canada or Mexico, followed days later by retaliatory tariffs from 60 countries, with Chinese export duties spiking as high as 145%. The shock hit Walmart first. The company, long built on the promise of everyday low prices, realized the math no longer worked. Instead of absorbing billions in new costs, it began shifting major parts of its supply chain out of the U.S., moving contract from China to Vietnam and India, and warning shoppers that prices would need to rise. Overnight, the American shopping experience changed. Beef that once cost $9 shot up to nearly $14. Lettuce climbed 30%, breakfast cereal rose by $2, and a sense of stability vanished from grocery aisles that had anchored American life for decades. What began inside the United States spilled rapidly across the globe as freight prices tripled, ports clogged with unclaimed containers, and shipping delays stretched into weeks. In Southeast Asia, shelves that once held American canned goods and packaged foods were stripped bare. In Nairobi and Manila, prices for oil, rice, and imports surged as families living on razor-thin margins struggled to cope. Meanwhile, Walmart's own balance sheet buckled. By the second quarter of 2025, the company was staring at $25 billion in losses, and its famed just-in-time delivery model, once considered the backbone of modern retail, collapsed under pressure. 10 major distribution centers across states from California to Florida were closed, putting more than 50,000 workers in limbo and gutting entire local economies that depended on the constant flow of Walmart trucks and warehouse activity. Target, Costco, and Home Depot soon followed, scrambling to find manufacturing capacity in Vietnam and India, only to encounter factories already pushed to their limits. Garment producers in Hanoi reported 6-month backlogs, and India electronics plants stumbled without Chinese components. As tariffs ricocheted across the world, a Chinese toy supplier that served Walmart slashed production by 70%. The U.S. Toy Association warned that half its members faced bankruptcy, and logistics brokers rewrote contracts week by week amid volatile freight rates. By early May, the situation worsened when Trump threatened a 50% tariff on European imports, erasing $180 billion in European market value in just 3 days and slowing German auto exports to a crawl. In South Korea, a sudden 25% tariff jeopardized half of Hyundai and Kia's U.S. shipments, prompting the Bank of Korea to project sweeping job losses. Back home, workers paid the price. Overtime evaporated, warehouse shifts were cut to the bone, and employees rotated unstable schedules in a desperate attempt to maintain income. Small and mid-sized businesses fared even worse as banks tightened loans. Venture capital fled logistics startups, and credit rating agencies downgraded the retail sector. Warehouses nationwide filled to capacity as companies hoarded inventory ahead of potential tariff expansions, pushing rental prices to 4 times their normal rates. Flex, a short-term storage firm, reported demand 6 times above average and was forced to create its first-ever waiting list. In agriculture, refrigerated containers full of beef, fruit, and produce sat rotting on docks because Walmart's disrupted distribution network couldn't absorb them. Farmers who had barely recovered from prior trade wars watched their export markets collapse overnight. For American households, the consequences compounded every week. Economists estimated tariffs added $1,000 per year to the average family's expenses, while Walmart CFO publicly confirmed huge spikes in essential goods. Patio furniture up $60, child car seats doubling in price, and online marketplace sellers raising prices or withdrawing entirely. By late May, just as the U.S. Court of International Trade temporarily suspended many of the tariffs for presidential overreach, uncertainty only deepened because no one knew whether the tariffs would snap back or intensify when the suspension ended. Leaked internal documents revealed Walmart's Project Sort, confirming widespread shutdowns of distribution centers and exposing the fragility of a system once considered unstoppable. Container ships floated offshore with no warehouse capacity to unload, suburban Walmart aisles sat empty, and shipping companies canceled sailings as logistics costs spiraled beyond historical norms. Communities built around Walmart's facilities, restaurants, trucking firms, gas stations, service providers, faced collapse as local tax revenue evaporated. The broader financial markets began to panic as analysts warned the disruption could trigger the largest retail collapse in modern U.S. history just as the holiday shopping season approached, a period that typically buoyed the economy. By summer, it was undeniable. Walmart's just-in-time model had failed. Global supply chains were buckling under the strain, American shoppers were paying more for less, and the workers who kept the system alive were left with uncertainty and dwindling paychecks. The tariffs meant to punish Beijing instead accelerated the restructuring of global trade, destabilized U.S. imports, and left American households carrying the burden. With distribution centers shuttered, supply routes fractured, and prices rising across every retail sector, the foundation of American consumer life was cracking. The only question now was how much more strain the system could withstand before it broke completely, and what would happen to the broader U.S. economy if the backbone of American retail finally gave way. I'd love to hear from you. Comment your thoughts and hit subscribe if you want to see more.